So hello and welcome to Design Chat, the best live design discussion on the internet. I'm your host, Ryan McGovern. On Twitter, I'm at Hoopajube and at Design Chat. Design Chat, every week we bring to you some of the coolest people involved in the design community so that you can have one-on-one interaction with them. This week we have a very special guest, Mr. Stephen Heller, very prolific writer and art director on design. Thank you. Golf clap, Stephen. We're honored to have you here tonight, Stephen.
Well, I'm honored to be anywhere.
So you're honored all the time. That's fantastic. That's a great way to be. That's a great way to be, man.
Betcha.
So we've got an hour to talk here. This is a very cool episode because we're broadcasting from our own site. For those of you who are not present watching this on the podcast, you can catch us live on Wednesday nights, designchat.info. And we might be changing that to /chat. Right now it's /live-show. A little awkward, which was pointed out to me this evening. I need to work on my URL descriptions. But anyway, I'm not even sure where to start tonight, given the sort of breadth of what would you say, interaction that you have in the design community, the number of things that you've been involved in and published, how many books that have your name on it. I tweeted out earlier today, if you've ever bought a book about design, you've most likely read the words of Stephen Heller. It's just absolutely unavoidable. And what we had Mirko Ilic on the show a number of months ago, about 2 months ago. He had this great line. He's like, if you come, and I love his accent too, by the way. He's got this very thick, sort of Eastern accent. And it's like, he goes, if you come to this country and you tell them when you get to the borders that you are a designer, they hand you over to Stephen Heller. Crack me up. That guy is so funny. So is that an official title for you? Do you handle all of the incoming designers from other countries?
Well, once upon a time, I handled all the Eastern Europeans.
Yeah.
And Mirko was one of them. He walked through the door and spoke. And I took pity on his accent, and I've tried to change it ever since. You know, in fact, he speaks very beautiful British English, but he just puts on that brogue, yeah.
We got to talking about client relationships and how those are formed and how he handles them and that sort of thing. And he said in forming a relationship, usually one of the first three questions is how the client asks you, how much is this going to cost me? And he always answers them, truck full of money.
Yeah, he's
and
hard.
I keep truck.
I think I've heard that about 35,000 times.
Oh, really? You're kidding.
Yeah, it's not ad-lib.
It wasn't ad-libbed. Well, it came off. No. It was hilarious. He was very entertaining that evening.
He is a very entertaining fellow.
Very much
and a very
so.
bright fellow, and probably has the most acute conceptual mind I've ever seen. He's always thinking, and he's always coming up with quite amazing ideas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Even if they offend sometimes, he doesn't hold back. He knows not editing.
Right. Well, they always say, you know, if an idea scares you, you know you're onto something. If it doesn't scare you, it's boring. Don't do it. So I think he's onto something there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm noticing actually, and I think it's because you're doing wireless tonight. We've got about a 1.5 seconds delay. So if there's awkward pauses, guys, I apologize. We've got a little delay tonight.
It could be the satellite phone because I'm on the North Pole.
Right. But we're all
really?
here. Go ahead.
It's not snowing here.
So I was saying, when doing a little bit of research and sort of looking at your liner notes of your career and your history and what you've been involved in, right at the top, 33 years of activity with, as an art director from the New York Times. And this is something I'm very interested in, from the visual communication perspective of what your history was in your interaction with the New York Times, and what that means as moving forward into how publication is absolutely changing and how much of it is going digital, and what that means for art directors now.
Well, every publication is going digital now. There's integration on every level. And ultimately, there's going to be a total paradigm shift. I don't think print is going to go away for a while, but certainly the emphasis on where the information is coming from is going to be in the digital realm. And it's going to be more and more on the small handheld devices or the iPad or iPaper or whatever it is that is going to emerge. And everybody's doing it. So the new generation of art directors are going to have to adapt.
And in doing that, taking that move and moving on, you still hear people saying print is dead, print is going to die. My personal belief is that print will never absolutely die and never exist anymore. People are still going to be dealing and designing in physical materials, just not on the same scale. And our focus, I think, is what is absolutely going to shift. And we are seeing right now the trend that old behavior in print publication and refusal of digital adoption is forcing some of these houses to close, and which is very unfortunate, because some bright minds involved in production of media are sort of being phased out very slowly. And I kind of can draw some parallels to this, to when computers and design software came out, and all of a sudden, as these design tools became easier to use and get, there was an influx of new design and new people involved in design, which meant that there was more, but we also had a wider breadth of bad design to mediocre design to really good design. And you being involved right now as the co-chair for the Design as Author program, I'm very interested to pick your brain about being a designer in this time with all these tools to sort of publish anything we want. Anyone can get on and publish that. Where are we now in the sort of transition of that, and how do you think that affects the world of the professional design?
Well, there are always changes in technology. Those changes in technology usually come at generational moments. There are always going to be those people who can't deal with the generational shift, and those people who have whatever timeless vocabularies or are able to change with the times. They're going to stick around. It's always the same. I mean, people from the 1940s are still working today, early 50s, late 50s. Seymour Quast, Milton Glaser, Ivan Chermayeff, they haven't died away. But there are new generations, and every 10 years you call a generation, and they've adapted to the new technologies and probably have adapted to them more naturally. I think, frankly, our job is to relate to the tools and to deal with the tools that come and try to find ways of either working with them or mitigating them. And I find in the Designer as Author program, our students tend to want to work more with their hands than ever before. They want to do more hand lettering. They want to hammer and nail things together. They want to cut. They want to glue. They want to sew. And they want to make videos. And they want to do print. So the whole thing is at their doorstep, at their fingertips. And they're doing it. I think that's what the new media is. It's a whole bunch of old media plus all this new stuff that we can integrate into it.
So with that generation that you're dealing with right now in that program, do you see absolute refusal in some situations to any digital formats?
No, nobody refuses anything. It would be silly to refuse. I mean, do we refuse to drive cars? Do we refuse to use flat screen TVs. I mean, we get what we get, and we try to enjoy them and or adapt to them.
Can you tell us a little bit about the beginning of the Design as Author program and the conception of that, where it came from, and its current state?
Well, I co-founded it with Lita Tellerico, who had been at SUNY Purchase before the School of Visual Arts. The idea was, how do you start a graduate program for a school like the School of Visual Arts, in fact, the School of Visual Arts, that hadn't had one before, and so that it wasn't duplicating other graduate programs that were out there. My idea was to create something that would address the next generation of designers, and I felt early on that that was going to be entrepreneurship, given that we were allowed to intermingle, coexist with all this great new technology that would make us producers more than service personnel. And so we started a program, Designer as Author, which we sometimes call the Designer as Entrepreneur. The idea that everybody in the program has to create a product that goes to market. And that product has to have value. That product has to have virtue. That product has to be unique. It can't just replicate something that's out there. And that the students have to learn how to develop a pitch as well as a proposal so that they have a chance to sell it in the world. It's not about profit. I mean, the projects that they do could earn nothing as long as they appeal to an audience and serve a need. Everything has to serve a need. So the program right now is in its 12th year. We've had some really big successes, like Deborah Adler's Target drug bottle. We've had some minor successes, like Jen Panapinto's Meizu bowls that are sold on TV and got a lot of play and are sold in boutiques, and they're bowls for measuring food intake. We've had a number of people do campaigns where they've taken their entrepreneurial sensibility and have gone to social or cultural institutions and have offered them a new revenue stream as well as a new identity. One of our former students, Bobby Martin, did that with the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. He created a whole new identity plus products, plus he created an event to draw people into that institution, which is a cultural institution. So the Designer as Author is something that I think everybody who has design ability can engage in, because it's marshaling their talents and marshaling their imagination. The one key for us is that every product has to start as autobiography. It's anything that the student does is a story, and the story has to start somewhere. And we start with something that was important to you and you and you internally.
One of the barriers, I think, one of the major difficulties I think designers and creatives encounter in their professional lives once leaving school in the safe zone where you can pretty much do anything you want, and having to work for clients and be able to make a living and function in the real world is this interaction with the business world, communication with marketers and business people, and in all of those interactions. How does the Design as Author program sort of approach that in teaching communication skills and overcoming some of those barriers?
Well, it's very important for the students who come into the program to want to project themselves out into the world, right? They can't be shy.
Right.
And what we do to support them is twofold. First of all, we started something called the Design Forum, a thesis forum, where we use the School of Visual Arts' new theater. We have a theater that has two separate theaters in it. One is 450 seats and the other is 250. And we started this last year, where the students get on stage and present their work, present their ideas in fully realized form to an audience. And we have a Broadway coach come in and coach them in how to present. And it's something that many people can relate to very easily,
Mm-hmm.
because what he does is he fuse into their own natural socializing skills,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can get up on a stage. They don't look down at their fingernails. They don't take deep breaths. They learn how to project. And that is a very good lesson that can go on in any kind of social situation. They're not always going to be on stage. They're going to be in front of you. They're going to be in front of me. But at the same time, what they've done by going on stage is develop the confidence to talk to people. So part of the whole idea of breaking into business is being able to talk the language, to be able to express what your idea is, to prove to or convince the person who's listening that your idea is worthy and good and viable, and then sit back, listen, and be able to exchange ideas. We figure an idea is nothing unless it's produced. Otherwise, it's just stuck there in your head or on your sketchbook page. And the only way to get it out is by making it and then addressing it, talking about it.
We're having a couple of hiccups here. I think I've just gotten that last part. The only way to get it out is to physically make it and produce it and get it out there. When students come to you and want to enter this program, what sort of range of students do you have? Do you have people fresh out of design school? Do you have people who have been working for a certain amount of time? Is there a requirement to be able to get involved in that school?
Well, yeah, we just finished reviewing 270 portfolios, the largest number ever. I think the recession has had an impact, as it often does, on graduate school. People, are taking the time. I don't know where they get the money, but they're taking the time to build their skill sets and do things that they wouldn't necessarily have done if they were in a job. So we had a huge number of portfolios. We select out of that first round about 40, and then we start interviewing people. The criteria for inclusion includes, A, where are you coming from, both mentally and physically. I mean, we like to have at least 50% foreign students. I believe that the foreign students bring so much to the program. We are in New York, which is kind of an island off of the United States anyway. But the cultural differences that still exist despite the internet and despite fast planes and boats is there. And so people from different parts of the world will always contribute to a critical mass. So that's one thing. The other thing is they have to want to be in the program, which means they have to understand what a designer as author or a designer author-auteur is somebody who really wants to do more than just be a service person. It doesn't mean that when they go back into the job market, they're not working in service field. It does mean that they have a hell of a lot more to give and a hell of a lot more confidence to give it. So the people we want, A, have to have good design skills. They have to be fluent in type. Type is our lingua franca. But other than that, they have to think in many different ways, because we never call ourselves a graphic design program. It's a design program. Integrate all sorts of things. We integrate motion. We integrate sound. We integrate stage. We integrate industrial design, photography, film, etc. So we're trying to do what we foresee as being the next wave of design. It's not purely graphic, but graphic is part of the linguistics.
How long does the program last, and what are the sort of milestones that are reached by the students throughout the course of the program?
Well, it lasts forever in your mind. It's one of those things we hope that's an experience that people don't forget. If nothing else, just listening to my bad puns is an experience they shouldn't forget. But it's a 2-year program. We actually have a 3-year component that we invite people to take part in if we think they have great potential but really need more remedial design. And these may be people who didn't have design backgrounds. We've had 2 students in that program from Harvard. We've had students from other non-design or art schools go through that. And they usually become fantastic students and workers after that because they've gotten part of SVA's undergraduate program as a remedial workshop. So it goes for 2 years. The first year is kind of a boot camp. The second year is mostly thesis. The 2 years go very quickly, very quickly. It seems like almost yesterday I had hair down to my shoulders and a long black beard, and I'm looking at myself now and I'm kind of shocked.
And, almost every single chat I've done thus far, this is episode 34, 43, sorry. That's been a lot.
Very good number because it equals 7.
It is, and it's a lucky number. And almost every single one of them, we've heard from our guests that this is either the first time they've ever done a video chat period or the first time that they've used the camera, activated the camera on their computers. And I'm very excited about that.
Again, I missed you.
I was just saying how most of the time that we talk to someone, we hear it's the first time they've ever activated their video camera on their computers. And I'm very excited about that because I've long been sort of aggravated that not many people have, involved themselves in video chats, and it hasn't taken off the way that I thought it would when I first heard of it, 6 or 7 years ago, and Apple started producing these machines that automatically included them or selling the eyesights or that sort of thing. And on that note, I think it's very interesting that 50% of your students at SVA there are international. And my question to that is, do you think it would ever be possible to include students who are not physically present in New York? Would it ever work in a fashion where you could communicate clearly enough with students who are located anywhere in the world?
Well, I'll answer that first by saying no. Absolutely not.
Okay.
But I'll say this, we do a lot of our interviewing over Skype.
Okay.
And it is much better than doing it on the telephone alone. And while it's not as good as a face-to-face interview where you actually see, smell, can touch the person in front of you, it's quite amazing that we can talk to somebody across the world. And those people across the world are anxious to be part of our conversation. But I think the graduate experience is as much about being there, about being with other students. 50%, I'm using a lot of percentages here, but 50% of what the student gets out of our program are the other students that they're sitting next to. We set up our studio, and we call it a studio, just like a design firm. So they're in pods. They're working very closely to one another. They can be there 24/7. This becomes a family, and it's great to see that. I grew up in a family of my mother, my father, and me. I had nobody really to talk to. So now I'm involved in a design graduate at 7 o'clock. There are always a few people there, and they grow and grow as the day goes on, and they activate themselves, and they do things, and you can see them working. You can see them churning stuff out. You couldn't do that via the internet. No, get that idea out of your head.
It's not even possible. I understand. I find that very interesting because when I went through my program, I graduated with a degree in visual communications, and upon being accepted to the program, a letter was sent out to the houses saying that in order to continue in this program, you had to purchase a laptop. You could not continue the visual communication program without a laptop. And what that did is it set off a chain of events where the school was not supporting computer labs that could sort of contain all of the students all of the time. So students would come in for the lectures, 3 hours, here, 3 hours there, and they would go home to do their creative work. And one of the things I knew immediately in participating in that is that I immediately felt I was missing out on something. And because when I was in the class and I was interacting with students and that sort of thing, there's an energy that's involved there. So I can completely side with you on that. That it's not the same learning experience. You're not going to get the social skills out of it unless you're there working with the students. A couple of notes for people who haven't been here before. We do about 45 minutes of chat. We do take questions from the audience. Please do not hesitate to keep on asking those questions in the chat room, because we will serve those questions back up to Stephen at the end of the chat. So let's get into a little bit of your involvement with the New York Times and how that began, and the sort of life that's had.
Well, I started at the Times when I was 24 years old. Before that, I was working for underground newspapers, equivalent of 70s DIY papers. I worked for the New York Free Press, the East Village Other, and I was the art director of Screw, and I was the publisher of the New York Review of Sex.
That's very exciting. Which of those were your favorite interaction, your favorite job? Can you name a favorite?
My favorite job was just doing it. It was fun. I was in high school when I started. The idea that I could work on publications and just do kind of artsy things was really terrific. It's not unlike what people do on the web today when they try to be television shows or radio shows or any other kind of artistic event happening online. It just happened to be the lower tech side of it. But it was pretty damn great. I was arrested twice for pornography, although I didn't know what I was being arrested for, but it led to the New York Times.
I want to hear more about that story. You were arrested twice for producing artwork that was published that was considered pornography?
I was arrested twice for publishing the New York Review of Sex, which was considered a prurient pandering. And there were about 4 or 5 underground newspapers that dealt exclusively with sex. One was Screw, one was Pleasure, one was Kiss, the New York Review of Sex, and then there was one called Smut. And we were all lefties, left-wingers. We all had political inclinations on the left side. We were all against the war. We were all kind of hippie-ish. But we were also entrepreneurial, not in a social entrepreneurial way. We just wanted to create environments, communication environments. And it was one of those things where you're young enough not to see any consequences or see any bad consequences. Mm-hmm. And it allowed me to, become me. It was it was just the right time in the right place. And yes, I was arrested and I went to jail for a little while. My case was thrown out in Supreme Court, not U.S. Supreme Court, but New York Supreme Court. It was a free speech issue. The publication was ultimately called the New York Review of Sex and Politics. And our mafia distributor once said I was the only person in New York that could make a sex paper fail.
An awesome accomplishment, just even to be involved in it. That's fantastic. An event happened this week where Apple decided to not allow. They kicked off, I think it was like 5,000 applications that were available for the iPhone that had to do with sexually explicit material. And some people are crying foul and saying, once you get on that sort of slippery slope of censoring this type of material, where does it stop? Because there are other applications like the swimsuit, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue kind of thing, which, crosses that line where, some of them were very similar to that and being kicked off for that. And I'm very curious to hear your opinion on What happens next, and where does that go?
Well, the internet, as we all know, has been a fairly open environment for a lot of things. I mean, I would, in my heart of hearts, would like to see the ultra right-wing hate groups off the internet, because they make some actually well-designed websites that spew hate all over the place. That's pornography to me. But I am a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, and if you're going to crush freedom over on this side, it's very easy to crush freedom on that side. And so, as you say, it's a slippery slope. In terms of what I was doing back in the 60s and early 70s, it was to open up the mores of the society. We didn't know we were doing that. We just figured we were busting people's chops. We were the anti-establishment. It was something to do. I used to wear a little button that said, "I am an enemy of the state." My parents hated it when I wore it. I didn't even know what I was wearing, but it felt right to me, as it does to any younger generation. I think, interestingly enough, the radical forces today happen to be the teabag baggers. They're taking on some of the same characteristics of the New Left back in the 60s: agitational, propaganda, protest, those things. As far as I'm concerned, they're not doing it for the right reasons, and we were. So that's the way, there's a right and there's a wrong, and of course there's a middle.
It's a very interesting way of thinking. You sort of struck a chord when, about the button that you would wear. That's sort of like anti-establishment, and there are so many rules placed on us in life and the workplace, design rules that we're supposed to adhere to supposedly be successful and be accepted, and be involved in the community. And it's those people who are able to make connections outside of those rules and forge ahead, who create new and interesting things and ways of interacting. And I don't know, I'm just kind of sort of dwelling on it. It's a very exciting sort of way of thinking. Do any of those lessons or patterns of thought get sort of served up in the SVA program?
Well, the idea of any academic program that's a graduate program is you're there to kick up dust. You're not there just to do what was done already. You're there to learn about what was done already and then build on it. That's what progress is all about. When we were doing the New York Review of Sex and Screw and the other sex papers, by today's standards, they were pretty tame. Just as Eros, if you remember Eros, designed by Herb Lubalin, which sent its publisher, the only American publisher in the 20th century, to go to jail for his publishing efforts. You look at it now and it's just a gorgeous magazine. You can't imagine why there was so much of a hoopla against it. Early Esquire, you can't imagine why people thought those pinups were offensive. But taste is contextual, mores are contextual, and the idea of a free society like ours is that you build on that and you don't go backwards. You build and you push boundaries. And sometimes those boundaries are hard to take. Sometimes they're fashion boundaries. Sometimes they're language boundaries. Sometimes they're social interaction boundaries. But that's what progress is all about. And then you sit back and you figure out what it is. You try to separate the wheat from the chaff and not keep the chaff.
You've been involved in a countless number of design publications and books and that sort of thing. Paula Scher was quoted as calling you the ubiquitous, timeless chronicler of our design times when you received the AIGA medal in 1999. I'm very interested to hear about your motivations, what keeps you involved at such a high level and producing so many different materials in doing what you do.
Well, first of all, I don't want to die just yet. And if you don't do things, your brain cells die, right? It's a simple matter of biology. Yeah. I have a lot of curiosities. I have a lot of passions. I have a lot of interests. Now, some of them you could say are very narrow. I mean, two of the books I did were on a great interest of mine, and that's totalitarianism and fascism. I did a book on the swastika, and I did a book called Iron Fists Branding the Totalitarian State. These are things that have interested me ever since I was a kid. I went to a military school, so I was kind of interested in what was going on as under the surface. You know, here were kids who were being trained, so to speak, to be cogs in a wheel. I didn't like that cog idea. So anyway, I have that interest. I have a very strong interest in civil rights. I have a very strong interest in New York City, so I've done 5 or 6 books about New York City. But it all is filtered through the lens of design. And that's because I started practicing it when I was 16, 17 years old, and it stuck. That's where I ended up having a career. And I figured if I didn't do this, I probably would have been a historian. I probably would have followed in my uncle's footsteps, who was a historian at Columbia. And I probably would have been interested in American history. So instead, I didn't have a formal education. I didn't graduate from college. I went right to work, basically in the trenches of the underground left. And I realized that there was something historical about what I was doing, not me.
We're breaking up a little bit. We're having a little bit of video lag.
I started chronicling it, and I started writing about it. And I respect it.
So everybody hang on just for a couple seconds. It gets
too long and complicated to talk about the trees that I... So it ceases.
I think we caught about 50% of the last minute and a half. So we're just going to... I think we've caught up, though. I think it just sort of... So give me the thumbs up if you can hear me.
I hear you.
Okay, good. So we're nearing the last 15 and 20 minutes of the chat. In a couple minutes, we're going to change directions and take audience member questions. Real quick, can you guys just double check the video? So for anybody who hasn't been here before, we get together every week to talk about design and bring on interesting people for you to interact with on a first-hand basis. Couple of announcements. On Friday, this February the 26th, if you're in Chicago, come check us out. We're going to be doing an event. The STA, Society of Typographic Arts, has asked me to come speak to their members at Critical Mass. We're going to be at a studio, Critical Mass. Go to sda-chicago.com to find out more. And if you're in Chicago, definitely come out and hang with us on this Friday night. So I think we're ready here. We're going to make the transition. We're going to start asking audience questions. Let me just double check my notes real quick. So the first question tonight comes from Orso Designs, who asks, what do you think about the students who just graduated from a design program who develop for themselves? Sorry, the question got kind of broke up here. I'm only getting half of it. So we'll come back to that one in a second.
You better say it again.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Joseph Marsh asks, Stephen, do you ever go to any of the AIGA national conferences?
I lost you.
Joseph Marsh asks, do you ever go to any of the AIGA national conferences? Still not syncing up?
Yeah, I've been to almost... Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Yep.
I go to almost all of them. I haven't been to the last 2, but I used to be quite a frequenter, and I'd speak at all of them. I always have.
Lost audio. Everybody just hang on a minute in the video. Hopefully we'll catch up in just a second.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I think we're back. This is fun, isn't it? It's like a teeter-totter. Working, not working. Working, not working. You know, this is a new emerging media, people, and sometimes there are bugs in the system, and that happens. Um, some kinks, yeah. Just talk amongst yourselves in the room. Actually, how about this? For anybody who's in the room right now, post your, if you're on Twitter, put your Twitter handle so everybody can follow everyone here. Fabio, that's why we love Design Chat. One thing to note is that we have a Twitter account called DesignChat Links. You see them in the chat room tonight being active. What that does is it chronicles any of the links that we talk about during the chat. So if you're trying to think of something, a reference later, go to twitter.com/DesignChatLinks, and you can see some of the web links that we refer to in the chat. Very excited to see some new faces in here tonight. I think it's the first time I've seen AIGA Honolulu. Aloha, what is going on in Hawaii? I'm so excited that so many people from different areas of the country and other countries, you know, we've had people from Brazil, we've had people from China. I was talking to a guy in India this week. If you're in a different country, not in the U.S., put that up there too. I want to see what cities you're from and what countries you're from. I see Chicago, I see D.C., I see Brazil, Orlando, Chisilla. Where in the world is Chisilla? Adam Groom, you're in Northwest Indiana, dude. Shyzilla. I was like, Chisilla? I've never heard of that. Mexico City, that's awesome. It's next to Godzilla. Brooklyn, Ohio, Switzerland. We have somebody from Switzerland, Melbourne, Australia. That's fantastic.
Wow.
UK. I'm very sort of honored. I think Steven's back. Hello.
Hello.
We were just talking to the audience about where everybody's from. We've seen a lot of crazy places. Switzerland, Boston, LA, all over the place. Poland in here, UK. If you're in the UK, isn't it like 3 o'clock in the morning? That means I really, really appreciate you being here. I mean, that really means a lot to me. Stephen, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes. So let's continue then. Next question comes from Art and Design. Asks, do you think that it is necessary to butt against cultural norms in order to find your creative voice?
Doesn't hurt. I mean, I think your creative voice will come in butting against cultural norms. Is not necessarily acceptable, and you have to, while at the same time, perhaps push the boundaries. Sure. Do something that somebody is going to object to, and find out why it's objectionable, and deal with that fact. Sometimes it truly is objectionable. Sometimes, given the context you live in. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's just closed-mindedness. So yeah, put your butt on the line.
I like it. Orso Designs wants to know, sorry, that one got weirded out again too. AIGA Honolulu asks, Stephen, what are your thoughts on crowdsourcing? This is a very hot topic right now. Spec work and crowdsourcing.
Very hot topic, and I know my students need to address it. What I really find objectionable are any of these pseudosciences that are designed to manipulate. The idea of PR, for example, even though it started as a kind of beneficial activity, was about manipulation, and we're manipulated every single day. Crowdsourcing, to me, another part of that manipulation, another way of grabbing a market, another way of determining an audience. So, you know, use it for whatever needs are necessary within this particular business of design communication. But don't take it so seriously.
Okay. Chat 101 said, love the Screw magazine, hippie jail stuff. Are you a 911 truther? Will New Yorkers ever hear the truth? Did you get that question?
got the question. I don't know what it means.
Do you think there's a
First of
9/11
all, this
conspiracy?
whole idea of the world is in cahoots to make the world a very unpleasant place to be. That's a conspiracy. No, the whole truther nonsense. Okay.
So next question asks, Gruviva wants to know, Stephen, why do you think that there wasn't more revolt in the design community when the Iraq War started?
Revolt against what? The administration?
Administration or the war itself?
Well, I mean, I live in New York. There was a tremendous amount of dissent war. And it wasn't just from designers, but designers took part in that. The first war, the first Iraq War, I think took people unawares, and there was very little negative or dissenting response. I think it started growing towards the end, and then it was over. But I think the Iraq War generated a considerable amount of protest from graphic designers, from artists, from everybody. And you know, it was one of those strange wars. I mean, those of us who lived through the Vietnam War, if you're using the same paradigm, it can't be really equated, because here we were in support of the troops. Here we were in support of the idea that a dictatorship should be destroyed and there should be freedoms. But we also knew, I think, that it was going to be very difficult for our government to go into a part of the world it knew nothing about in real time and make the substantive changes that it professed to want to make, when in fact it was really about oil.
And a question that I always like to ask once in a while, usually gets a good response. Do you have any guilty pleasure websites that you visit daily?
I visit my own.
That's fantastic.
There are some guilty pleasure websites, but I'm not going to share them because I want them to be secret. But no, I do the Daily Heller for print magazine, and usually when there's something that I find particularly wonderful, I blog it and try to make a story out of it. There are some wonderful collections out there. I mean, I'm an archivist, so I love the sites that have archives, and they're kind of arcane. You know, they're the kinds of sites that appeal to my research instincts, not necessarily the kinds of sites that will appeal to somebody else. But I do, unfortunately, spend an inordinate amount of time on the web these days.
And you think it's unfortunate?
I do think it's unfortunate because I find that it adds an hour to my life. I once wrote about this, I think for Core 77, how I fool myself into waking up earlier, and I do it so that I could spend that time on the web. In fact, what happens every morning is I go in to do my Daily Heller blog in the bathroom.
I'm sorry, your video just cut off. The last thing I heard was the first thing you do in the morning is?
I go in and do my Daily Heller blog in the bathroom.
In the bathroom? You actually blog from the bathroom? Is that noted anywhere on the blog?
No. I'm telling you only. It's a secret.
No one else will ever hear it. No one will ever hear it.
I used to read Russian literature in the bathroom.
The times they are changing. So that seeing yourself as an archivist, I can definitely relate to that in something that we're doing here. Even though that what we do at DesignChat is a live interaction, it gets recorded, it gets saved, it gets uploaded, and it's online for anyone to download at their leisure afterwards. And I'm very excited about this because I think it's going to create some interactions that just haven't been seen before and involve the design community in a larger way to break down corporate and competitive barriers. And I'm very excited to have had the time to talk to you this evening, and honored, of course, to have you on and share your time with the design community. So thank you very much for coming out tonight.
And thank you very much. It was truly a pleasure. And I wish I didn't have wireless, because I'm sorry, this has probably been annoying to a lot of people to have this delay.
I don't apologize at all. It's very okay. It happens, and it's part of the learning curve, I guess, of interacting in these new medias, which is okay, because we're very excited by the content and getting to share your thoughts this evening. So for everybody who's here, thank you guys for coming out. And just a couple of more notes. Thank you to Samada Mason for supporting DesignChat for so long, and we're broadcasting from their offices right now, samadamason.com. Definitely check them out, a cool agency in West Dundee. Next week, we are going to be talking to Mr. Rick Valicenti of Thirst on Twitter. They are 3ST Happenings. You can find their work at 3st.com. And we'll, same time, same place, 8 o'clock Wednesday night, Central Time, and we will see you then. Mr. Stephen Heller, thank you again, and everybody check out his website, hellerbooks.com, and there was another, your print also. What is the URL? Where can they find your print, Daily Heller?
It's printmag.com, and they're
okay. We're putting the link up in the chat room right now.
cool.
Great.
So now I can get undressed.
I'm sorry, your audio is breaking up. I can't hear you.
Now I can take my clothes off.
Yes, you can. As soon as you hit that little button that says "Stop Broadcasting."
Ryan made me put my clothes back on, and it's been hot ever since.
I do not want you to be uncomfortable. Have a good night.
Adios.